The first time he looked at me like that, I almost apologized. I found the listing by accident. $50 for a 3-hour session as a clothed life drawing model for an adult art class. The description said no experience necessary, just the ability to hold a position for 20 minutes at a time. I could do that. I'd been holding positions for years, smile in place, shoulders back, taking up exactly the right amount of space and not a fraction more. I needed the money and I needed to get out of my apartment. And those two things together were apparently enough to make me walk into a converted warehouse. In the arts district on a Thursday evening with my coat clutched to my chest like a shield. The space was beautiful in an unfinished way. Raw brick, north-facing skylights going purple with late afternoon, the smell of turpentine and something warmer underneath it. Easels arranged in a loose semicircle. And standing at the center of the room, studying a large format sketch with a pencil tucked behind his ear, was the instructor, Daniel. He introduced himself simply, shook my hand without making it anything, showed me where to put my things. He was in his late 30s. Quiet in the way that some people are loud, it filled the room. His hands were stained faintly at the fingers, and when he smiled it was brief and genuine, and then it was gone, back to something more considered. "We'll start with 5-minute gestures," he said, "just to warm up. Then longer poses. You tell me if something's uncomfortable. Any position can be adjusted." I nodded and stood where he indicated, a low wooden platform, a stool, a lamp angled to cast long shadow. 6 students arranged themselves at their easels. I'd expected to feel exposed. I felt instead oddly calm, like being in a room full of people all looking slightly past me. Then Daniel looked at me. Not past me, at me. The way a person looks at something they're genuinely trying to understand. I almost apologized. The adjustment happened during the second long pose, 20 minutes in. I was seated with one hand in my lap and the other resting on my knee, and apparently the angle of my arm was creating a shadow that complicated things for the left side of the semicircle. Daniel crossed the room without announcement, the way he moved through his own space, unhurried, certain. "May I?" he asked, already slowing, giving me time to say no. I said yes. He lifted my wrist lightly, just 2 fingers, barely contact, and turned my palm upward. Then he adjusted the angle of my elbow. With a touch so brief and deliberate, it felt like a question. "Light reads better this way," he said. And then softer, almost to himself. "There." He stepped back. I felt the place where his fingers had been for the rest of the session. 3 weeks in, I was a regular. I told myself it was the $50. It was not entirely the $50. There was something happening in that room that I couldn't explain to my friends, who asked if it was weird being looked at. "It's not really like being looked at," I tried to say. "It's more like being studied." And that distinction meant something I hadn't figured out yet. My last relationship had lasted 4 years. He had looked at me the way people look at furniture. They've stopped noticing, registering presence, not particulars. When it ended, he said I was hard to know. I believed him for a long time after. In Daniel's studio, people drew the line of my jaw, the curve of my shoulder, the way my hands rested in my lap like 2 small sleeping things. I started sitting up straighter, not performing, just taking up the space I actually occupied. It was week 5 when the students left early. A scheduling conflict, half the class gone by 8:30. 2 others followed. By 9 it was just Daniel at his easel and me on the platform. And some agreement seemed to pass between us without a word. Neither of us moved to end it. He worked in silence for a while. I watched him watching me. There was a charcoal smudge at his jaw, and he didn't know it was there. And for some reason that made something in my chest go soft. "You can relax the pose," he said eventually. "This is more of a study." "A study of what?" He considered this like it was a real question. The way you go still when you think no one is watching, versus the way you go still when you know they are. A pause. They look different. I didn't know what to say to that. He set the charcoal down and turned the easel slightly, not showing me, just shifting his angle, a habit. "You can look around if you want. You don't have to hold." So I looked around. I looked at the high windows gone fully dark now, the other easels with their half-finished gesture drawings, the shelves of paint and medium and reference books with cracked spines, a small photograph pinned to the wall near his station, too far to see clearly. I looked at him. "What made you stop?" I asked. "The portrait work." A long pause, long enough that I thought I'd misjudged something. "I got very focused on what other people thought of the work," he finally said. "Stop trusting what I saw." The two things you need most, gone at the same time. He picked up the charcoal again. I came back to teaching thinking I'd remember. And I did eventually. What reminded you? He glanced up, the direct look, the one that still caught me slightly off guard every time. This, he said simply, watching people see themselves. He showed me the drawings at the end of week 6. It was incidental, or presented as incidental. He had a folder of studies from the session, and we were standing at the supply table while I pulled on my coat, and he just set them out, not for praise, more like he was checking something. I looked at them. A woman sitting with her hands in her lap, her face slightly turned. There was something in the line of her shoulders, not small, not held in, something that looked startlingly like composure. I stopped. That's you, he said. I don't look like that. He didn't argue. He just waited the way he'd learned, or maybe always known, to wait, until I looked again. Oh, I thought, maybe I do. We were standing very close. It had happened gradually, the way things do when no one makes a decision. We were looking at the drawings, and the table was small, and at some point the distance between us had become something. I was aware of the way you become aware of a sound only when it stops. I could see the photograph on his wall from here. A coastline, no people. Do you ever miss it? I asked. The showing, the career part of it. Sometimes, he said. Mostly, I think. I was trying to make people see something they weren't ready to see. A pause. This is better. People come here wanting to look, wanting to understand something. He glanced sideways at me, or wanting to be understood. The last sentence landed somewhere specific. I didn't look away from the drawing. Which was I? A long moment, the warehouse settling around us, the particular silence of a space that held a lot of attention and was now holding just ours. Both, he said. From the first week, my coat was in my hands. The drawings were on the table. Neither of us reached for the light switch. I started. Thursday, he said quietly. I usually work in the mornings. Smaller sessions, one subject, a pause that held its breath. If you wanted to see what that's like. I looked at him, at the smudge of charcoal I'd been noticing for an hour, at the careful, unhurried way he was watching me, not past me, not through me, at me. I'd want to see what that's like, I said. And he smiled, the real one, brief and genuine. Then it stayed.